Okay, let's be real. Have you ever had this amazing new routine that just completely falls apart after a few weeks? Yeah? Then this one's for you. We're going to look at a totally new way to think about consistency. And spoiler alert, it has nothing to do with just trying to be more disciplined.
So, just for a second, I want you to be totally honest with yourself. Think back to January 1st. You were probably full of all that new year, new me energy, right? Okay, so how many of those amazing resolutions are you still doing? If the answer is, not many, you are definitely not alone. And the reason why is probably not what you think.
I mean, this isn't your first rodeo, right? You get super inspired, you map out the perfect routine, and you start off so strong. But then, a few days in, that motivation just dips. Life gets in the way, and boom, you're right back at square one, just waiting for the next Monday to try all over again. Look, this cycle isn't because you're lazy. It's a sign that you're stuck in this really common, really frustrating loop.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to break down what the consistency trap actually is. Then, we'll get into a big idea. This is a problem of design. From there, we'll jump into a 4-phase solution. We'll start with phase 1, which is all about how to rewire your brain. Then we'll cover the next 3 phases. And finally, we'll see how all of this comes together to build your new identity. Okay, let's dive right in with the core problem, the consistency trap. This is that whole emotional, psychological cycle that just keeps us spinning our wheels. And this is where it really hurts, right? It's not just that you're not making progress. The real damage is what happens with every single failed attempt. You start telling yourself this story, like, I'm just an inconsistent person, or I just don't have enough discipline. You start to believe that it's a fundamental part of who you are.
But what if that whole story you're telling yourself is just wrong? This brings us to probably the single most important idea in this entire explainer. You are not the problem. The problem is the badly designed routines you've been forcing yourself to follow.
This right here, this is the key. We always think we just need to be tougher, more motivated. But the argument here is that no amount of willpower can ever fix a broken system. So instead of trying to cram ourselves into a routine that doesn't fit, we need to design routines that actually fit us and our real lives.
So, what does a badly designed routine actually look like? Well, you've probably seen them. It's the one that demands a 3-hour morning ritual when you can barely find 30 minutes. Or it asks you to start like 10 new habits all at once, which just completely overwhelms your brain. It's the kind of plan that only works on your absolute best, highest energy days. It has zero flexibility for when, life happens. And honestly, it often fails the reality check because it's designed for some fantasy life, not for someone with a real job and maybe even a shared bathroom.
Okay, so how do we fix this mess? Well, the source material lays out this awesome 4-phase system called the REAL method. It's an acronym, right? It stands for rewire, embed, align, and lock in. Think of it as a step-by-step guide for building routines that are actually designed for real people with, real lives. All right, let's get into phase 1, which is where it all begins. Rewire your thinking. This is the bedrock. It's about making a huge shift from always trying to rely on that feeling of motivation, which we all know comes and goes, to relying on the strength of your system's design.
In this mindset shift, it is everything. We're so used to asking ourselves, how can I get more motivated? But that's just the wrong question. The new, way smarter question is this: how can I design this habit so that it gets done even when I have absolutely zero motivation? See the difference? That changes the entire game.
So how do you actually do that? Well, first, you start designing for your worst day, not your best one. So instead of a crazy 90-minute workout, your default is just a 15-minute walk. Simple. Next, you separate the act of starting from the intensity. Your only job is to show up and start. Anything more is a bonus. You also have to accept that missing a day isn't a failure. It's just an expected part of the process. And finally, when you do feel that burst of motivation, use that energy to plan and make your system even simpler, not to do some insane workout that just leaves you exhausted for the next 3 days.
Okay, so once you've got that new mindset wired in, you can start building on that foundation with the next 3 phases. These are the parts that really make the new habit stick and feel like a totally natural part of your life. Phase 2 is all about how to embed the habit. This is where we stop using brute force and start getting smart. The big question here is, how can I make this the easiest possible choice? It's about engineering your environment to remove friction, simple stuff like laying out your gym clothes the night before, and you anchor the new habit to something you already do, like writing 1 sentence in a journal right after you brush your teeth. You're basically making it the path of least resistance.
Next up, phase 3, align.
You know, a habit without a real why behind it is super fragile. So many of our goals just die because they're not really our goals. They're just something we saw on social media and thought we should do. Alignment is all about connecting your routine to something you personally value, deep down. You don't just save money because you're supposed to, you save money because you deeply crave the freedom and security it provides. That personal why is way more powerful than discipline could ever be.
And that brings us to the final phase. Number 4, lock in your routine. This is what makes it truly unbreakable. The key insight here is to accept that bad days aren't some weird exception to the plan. They are the plan. Life is messy. So instead of letting one bad day derail everything, you design a system that can take the hit and just keep on going. And here's a perfect, concrete example of how that works. Let's say your goal is to study every day. On a good day, when you're feeling great, you might do a 3-hour deep work session. Awesome. But on a bad day, you're tired, you're stressed, you're totally overwhelmed, the plan is simply to open your notes for 5 minutes. And here's the most important part. Both of those count as a win. By just showing up, even for that tiny minimum, you keep the streak alive. You never break the chain, the whole system is protected. So, where does all of this lead? Well, it leads to a new identity. But here's the thing, it's an identity that isn't based on some personality trait you are either born with or not. It's based entirely on the systems you build and the decisions you make, day in and day out.
I absolutely love this quote because it's so freeing. It separates the action from the identity. You don't have to somehow transform into a disciplined person. You just have to build a system that helps you make decisions like one. And that's something anyone can do.
And really, that's the big secret. You know those people who seem so effortlessly consistent? They're not superhuman. They're not just wired differently than the rest of us. They simply have better systems. Systems that work for them instead of against them. And with this framework, now you have one too.
Remember, this whole thing starts by designing better, not just by trying harder. So, the only question left is the one that really matters, the one that gets you started. Looking at your own life right now, what's the one routine you're going to redesign first?